Hello everyone, my name is Leo. Today we are going to talk about the part 2 of why Korea is dying. So today's topic, we will talk further about what is happening. So in our last conversation, we were deeply concerning about in 2060, our Korean population will have a drastic change of having decreasing with our rate of 0.72. So the German YouTubers were talking about how Korea is having this birth rate issue and how it's going to eventually cause this economic collapse that will come. It is all because of the working age population. With the decrease in population, South Korea's working age population will also go down. Currently, around 37 million people are working. By 2060, it drops by half to just 17 million. It's terrible. It's terrible. So even if technological advancements significantly boost productivity per worker, because of the sheer number of working age people is halved, they predict that South Korea's GDP will peak in the 2040 and we will enter a permanent economic recession. The German YouTubers are predicting that Korea is going to have a permanent economic recession based on this birth rate reducing the population drastically by half in 2060. So with the less money, with fewer working people, who's going to pay taxes? Who's going to build the country? Yes, that is why we are going to have economic collapse by 2040 or 2060. And then here's the second part of this conversation. The worst part of the South Korea that we'll be facing is a collapse of its society and culture, social and cultural collapse. Why? Proportion of people aged 25 to 35 will fall between 5% of the total population. What does that mean? There will be no new culture. People will spend their entire lives listening only to the songs they grew up until their mid-30s. In 2060s, people will only play retro video games or read old books, or even on Netflix, you'll be able to see only the old shows that people still want to watch, like Matrix, Mission Impossible 1 and 2, when they are bored. That's just how it is. Once people are going to go over 35, people hardly embrace anything new. Sure, country music might make a brief comeback for the young generation, but it wouldn't be like old days. And will older folks be happy? By 2060, 50% of South Koreans in their 70s will have no living relatives, and 30% would not have any children. In short, South Korea will be filled with elderly people living alone, and this isn't merely possibility. It's already set in stone. By then, the generation in their 70s has already been born, and the number of children is effectively determined. South Korea's loneliness will become extremely difficult. What will that lead to? So, the collapse of South Korean culture, as they put it, there will be no successors to our traditional culture, and no one to create new culture. Naturally, culture will collapse. With cultural decay and a dwindling population, small towns and rural areas will fall into complete decline. We can already see a glimpse of this in Japan. The vacant house problem. Rural areas will be utterly deserted. In fact, many regions will revert to nature. The countryside will be completely empty while everyone piled into the big cities. And if people can't bear this burden, if they can't handle the loneliness or the extra financial strain on their wages, what will happen? Some will choose to leave the country entirely. They even talk about mass exodus on a huge scale, but they are clearly assuming the worst. But beyond economic, social, and cultural collapse, what's even worse? There is no way back. There is simply no way to reverse this. That's the biggest problem, is the birth rate. Sure, many things can be reversed, environmental issues, for example, but no birth rate. Even if somehow tripled to a permanent 2.1, it wouldn't be enough. Even if it rose to 7 or 8, which is out of question, obviously, there is simply no way to replenish a population once its age group has declined. Immigration is the only possible fix. How are you supposed to suddenly boost the numbers for children born, say in 2011? It's already decided. numbers have plummeted. Unless you can hit the old figure of 6, 7, or 8 children per woman, even getting to 2.1 isn't sufficient. It would have to be much higher. And even if it did reach 6 or 7, it would still be difficult because it takes time to cross the death valley right here. That period of decline, though it might seem short, would last at least 20 years. Time is needed for that permanently damaged generation to pass. Even if later the numbers spike to 6 or 7, there's no way to recover what's been lost. There's simply no method to revert permanently back to a 2.1 fertility rate. And this astonishing channel by German YouTuber even asks, how could it get that bad? They are saying that South Korea is a nation built on an extremely competitive culture. Legally, the work week is 40 hours, but in reality, it can stretch to 52 hours. And for many unpaid overtime is the norm. Isn't this a system crafted by Koreans? The Korean government recently even proposed a 69 hours work week. Yes, they claim it's for economic development and to prop up faltering industries. But what's that for? You might remain number one in semiconductors, but can that stave off the collapse of South Korea? It really forces us to ask, what are we really building and maintaining our system for? And how can we improve things in the long run? So, according to OECD data, wages in Korea are 12% lower, while living costs are 55% higher. In Korea, people are overwhelmingly concentrated in big cities, more so than in other countries. So the burden is even greater. Parents shell out enormous sums for private education just to get their kids into top universities. These people are remarkable. Despite wages being 12% lower and living expenses 55% higher, the Korean people spend enormous amount of money on tutoring because if their kids don't succeed, they are seen as failure. Consequently, women end up shouldering even more work. And eventually, both men and women give up on starting families. If you're not going to be the main earner or take on extra burdens, you simply opt out of having children. That's the argument. And if you look at the conclusion of the German YouTuber, they state that the strangest part of all this is that nearly everyone involved does not grasp the gravity of the situation. They suggest, hey, maybe we should do something ourselves because these people really don't get it. So is South Korea finished? On March 14th, during the Global Sustainable Development Forum, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong gave a keynote speech touching on similar issues. Some argue that declining population might not be entirely negative. Fewer people could mean a higher per capita GDP and a better quality of life. But in my view, that argument only holds if the fertility rate is around 1.8. A rate of 0.75 spells disaster. A total fertility rate of 0.75 is far too low to expect any positive effects. So when the fertility rate drops that low, economic conditions deteriorate because there's less to go around. Soon, populist temptations start to take over. As economic growth stagnates, income distribution worsens, leading to hardship across all generations. This only deepens the conflicts between age groups and social classes. Some people then push for short-term populist welfare policies or cash handouts to ease the pain as everything becomes tougher, but such measures never solve the underlying issues. They just waste resources and risk creating a vicious cycle, just like Venezuela. The chance of that happening are extremely high. So, what's the root cause here? According to the Bank of Korea governor, it's the overwhelming competitive pressure and the anxiety over employment, housing, and childcare. The competition is just too fierce. One of the key factors, anxiety among young people, is the hyper-concentration in the metropolitan area. Over 50% of the South Korea's population GDP, and jobs are all centered in the Seoul region. Whereas in the US and Germany, it's about 5%. In the UK and Italy, it's about 10 to 20%. And even in Japan, it's below 30%. If you're not in Seoul metropolitan area, you're considered a loser. All the good opportunities and jobs are there. In the first quarter of 2025, Busan, one of our two major cities in Korea, lost its largest number of residents ever. How much did it drop? In one quarter, Busan lost 7,000 people. If the trend continues for 4 quarters, that's about 30,000 people. In this rate, in 7 years, the population will drop below 3 million. Losing 30,000 people a year is big number. It's like losing 15,000 students. Imagine high schools with 500 students each, or the equivalent of 20 high schools disappearing. To put that in simple, we're talking about Q1 2025 just recently. So why is everything so concentrated in metro area? There are many reasons. If you're not Korean, you might be curious why Korean people love Seoul. One of the biggest reasons the governor points out is that it's all because of the cutthroat college admissions competition. To get into a top university, you have to be in the metropolitan area. It's hard to live anywhere else. Life's main stage is only at the Seoul. It's nearly impossible to move away from it. Yet, we need to be there to get to the good college. The kids need to grow up in the good areas to remain in that metropolitan region. Even if they attend prestigious universities, they stay because top schools are also located in. So most of the kids are growing up in Seoul, and they end up in Seoul if they are lucky, because most of the good universities are only located in Seoul. If they make it, that's fantastic. If they don't make it, it's a bust. Getting into an institution like Seoul University or medical schools is a really huge deal for Korean people. So why people keep flocking to Seoul? This migration further concentrates the metropolitan population and drives up housing prices, which in turn worsens the low birth rate problem. In short, ultra-low fertility, metropolitan concentration, and hyper-competitive college admissions are all intertwined. If we don't address these issues immediately, we will face population extinction, perpetual negative growth, and enduring economic slump, explosive social conflicts, and a loss of opportunity and confidence among the youth. So what's the alternative? One of the proposals from the Bank of Korea is to implement a regional proportion admissions system. In other words, dividing the number of seats at Seoul National University by region. Something along those lines, allocating, say, 10% for Busan, 5% for a small city, another 5% for another smaller city, 3% for very countryside, 20% for Seoul. This would prevent students from all crowding into Seoul. It would also stop local students from having to travel to Seoul for extra private tutoring, which in turn could help maintain academic standards. Society still clings to the old ideas that high test score equal success, leaving everyone else labeled as failures. We've overlooked how much joy a child can bring, how much love they inspire, and just how vital the love between a couple. We've dismissed the value of family, and that mockery and neglect have been collected in today's disaster. I remember watching one of the Korean talk show where it was following with a mixed Korean-Japanese couple and their little one. At one point, the host was asking, raising a kid means you can't work as much and it's super expensive. What made you decide to have a child? In Japan, their fertility rate hovers around 1.2 kids per woman, still above that critical below 1 mark. But even so, with all the costs involved, her answer surprised me. She said, honestly, I never really thought about money. A child is just a pure joy and happiness. She went on to explain that she never once considered skipping kids because of the financial worries. Now, I know that's just her personal take. I've only met a handful of parents, but hearing her say that really hit me. I felt almost ashamed because she made it sound so simple. Having children brings this incredible unmatched happiness. They love talking about how much joy a family brings. But then, flip the script. What about all the expenses? How do you stay afloat? Watching that, I realized something important. Too often, here in US or Korea, we boil everything down about money. It struck me. If you're forced to frame a child as a financial loss, but hey, kids bring so much happiness. That switch from counting costs to counting joy felt like proof that we've let our values slip. I caught myself thinking, wait, am I really talking like that? Do I really think that way? And that was the lesson I walked away from. Kids aren't a line item on a spreadsheet. They are a source of life, laughter, and true fulfillment. The ultimatum here is that all the mockery and contempt talking about how having children will plunge you into poverty, that you will never be able to buy a house, and so on, has led to a global YouTuber to talk about South Korea, that South Korea is over, proclaiming that South Korea is finished. Personally, I'm not convinced that we are done yet. In January 2025, the birth rate actually began to rebound. So I brought it up today because I wanted to give some positive news to everyone who's watching this. There was a rise of 11% compared to the same month last year. That's encouraging. It means it's not over yet. Think of it like a baseball game. In the bottom of ninth, with 2 outs and 2 strikes, you may expect that everyone's going to go home, fans will cheer, but there's no rule against hitting 3 consecutive home runs. There have been several unforgettable games where that happened in baseball. It might still be too early for a comeback. In January, the birth rate was 0.88, which is typically a bit higher in that month, and even compared to last year. It's rising. If this trend quickly push it to 1.4, even if it later dips to around 3 or 4 during a rough patch before bouncing back, who can say what will happen? It's unpredictable. Who would have imagined hitting 3 home runs in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs? As a baseball fan, I believe the game isn't over yet. Till it's truly over. As one of the American baseball players that I remember, the game isn't over until it's over. If the love for family and your love and the joy of children triumph increase the birth rate, Koreans aren't finished. I hope South Korea becomes a nation that truly values family love and joy of children. I sincerely hope that. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.